What's good everyone, it's Kijani with a video recap of everything that we know so far about Variant and Criterion Dungeons. As I go over what we know, I will also be giving my overall thoughts plus make some predictions along the way. In addition to all of that, I will also go over the lore behind the Sildee subterrane, which will serve as a location for both Variant and Criterion Dungeons. Both are level 90 content scheduled to be released in patch 6.25. The 0.25 patch is generally released 2 months after the 0.2 patch. So if we expect patch 6.2 on August 23rd, we can expect patch 6.25 sometime late in October. So let's talk about Variant Dungeons. They're going to be casual dungeons that can be done with up to 4 players. If you use the duty finder, you will be queued with 3 other players. There are no role restrictions, and once you're within the Variant Dungeon, you will be allowed to change your job on the fly. The overall level of difficulty of the dungeon will be based on the number of players. With that said, I can't imagine it being too difficult since it's supposed to be casual content. The most exciting thing about Variant Dungeons is that they will be a choose your own adventure type dungeon where the route through the dungeon will vary based on player action. This feature is something completely brand new to dungeons in Final Fantasy XIV. Your decisions will ultimately determine the story that you will experience. Along the way, there will be an NPC described as quote unquote a certain someone that will provide insight as you go along. I have my guesses and a wish list as to who this certain someone will be, but we will get into that a bit later in the video. There will be no need to worry about not being able to experience the other story options featured in the Variant Dungeon. You will have the opportunity to run the Variant Dungeon multiple times to experience everything that the dungeon has to offer. What I am really looking forward to is the possibility of getting together with some friends to choose what story that we ultimately get as we work our way through the Variant Dungeon. My only concern about Variant Dungeons is when running it via the duty finder. Like, who gets to decide which route to ultimately take? Is it going to be a group decision where the group submits their choice in game, or will one person be the sole decision maker? If it is the latter, I can see players ultimately being unhappy if the chosen leader is just choosing whatever option just because. With that concern, I am ultimately glad that there will be an option to run Variant Dungeon solo. I know for me, I would feel rushed if the group had to constantly stop for me to read every glowing piece of paper on the ground. But that was my only concern so far with the information that we have about Variant Dungeons. Either way, I'm definitely looking forward to it. Criterion Dungeons are higher difficulty versions of Variant Dungeons. They were created due to the demand from the player base for higher difficulty content that could be done in smaller groups. Visually, they will be similar to Variant Dungeons, but with Criterion Dungeons, they're going to follow a specific path in that certain someone NPC will not be following you around. The party composition will be fixed, so you'll have to have 1 tank, 1 healer, and 2 DPS. We will be getting 2 separate Criterion Dungeons with different difficulties. The first being another Sildee subterrane, which will be similar in difficulty as in Extreme Duty. The other Criterion Dungeon will be another Sildee subterrane Savage, which, as the name implies, will be similar in difficulty as a Savage level encounter. In the Extreme version, there will be limited raises in the form of a duty action called Revival. They mentioned that this was to prevent any advantages gained by various party compositions, so you may want to think twice of that day 1 party of a warrior, white mage, red mage, and a summoner. If everyone in the party wipes, the enemies you defeated along the way will not be revived. The Savage version will certainly live up to the name. There will be no rezzing available at all. So if one party member dies, the rest of the party just has to pay their respects, then keep it moving. In addition, if the whole party dies, all the enemies you defeated along the way will be revived. To top all of that off, there will be sort of a dungeon-wide enrage timer where the enemies in the dungeon will receive a buff if you do not complete the dungeon in time. there will be lots of high stakes when it comes to running Criterion Dungeons, but we did ask for this, and I believe both difficulties will deliver the challenge that we are looking for. It's going to be interesting to see how difficult the bosses and the mobs will be. I think they will borrow a lot of what we saw in Save the Queen content, but of course on a smaller scale. For instance, I can see the trash mobs being similar to the trash mobs encountered in the Savage version of Delibrum Reginae. In Delibrum Reginae Savage, the trash mobs required a lot of coordination from the party, and this involved killing monsters in certain orders or in certain places, along with timely uses of skills like stuns and interrupts. In the overall scheme of things, I believe Criterion Dungeons will be a method to farm materials for the first step in the Endwalker relic weapon. The number of materials that you earn will probably be based on the difficulty of the Criterion Dungeon that you complete. I kinda expect that you will also be able to earn materials from the variant dungeons that you run as well. Of course, like any other relic grind, there will be other methods to earn materials if Criterion Dungeons end up not being your thing. I found the lore behind the Sildee subterrane incredibly interesting. It turns out that back in the day, Sildee used to be the sister state located alongside Ul'dah. Both cities were founded after a civil war divided the original city-state of Belladia into two cities. Sildee ended up being the more prosperous of the two cities. They accumulated a lot of wealth and were able to secure a stable source of water for the city. Basically, they were making it rain in more ways than one. On the other hand, the people of Ul'dah were not as fortunate. As you can imagine, this wealth disparity led to hostility between Ul'dah and Sildee. It eventually escalated into an all-out war, now known as the War of the Sisters. Both cities were evenly matched and pretty much fought to a standstill, so to turn the tide, the army of Ul'dah went deep into their bag of shenanigans. They had their thaumaturges create a powder called Traitor Spurn that had the ability to turn people into zombies. They tossed Traitor Spurn into Sildee, then sealed off the city, leaving the people of Sildee to deal with the zombie plague. With a zombie plague to contend with, the people of Sildee were ultimately defeated and their city was burned to the ground. The Ul'dah that we know of today is actually built on top of the ruins of Sildee. It's pretty messed up overall when you think about it, and you kinda wonder why no one in Ul'dah at the time questioned the zombie apocalypse that was going on across the street. Well, they did have questions, and the officials of Ul'dah made up a story that the people of Sildee were the ones who were raising the dead and used that reason to justify the war. Eventually, as time went on, the city-state of Sildee was forgotten about. However, there were some in-game references about what happened to the people in the city of Sildee. The patch 2.5 Hildebrand arc shed some light about the forgotten history and the cover-up. I feel this is going to give us a clue as to who will accompany us in the variant dungeon. At the end of the arc, Godbert said he wanted to investigate what happened in Sildee. Now, I don't think it's gonna be Godbert. I really think it's gonna be Inspector Briarden from the Hildebrand series. I think he has a vested interest since Ellie, the woman he wanted to marry, was trying to expose what really happened to the people in Sildee. But that's just my best guess. If you have any guesses or theories that you would like to share, let me know in the comments of the video. That's all I got for this video covering Criterion and variant dungeons. As always, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, peace.